All right, we're live. Hey, everybody. My name is Brian. I am the lead for the DRPM Decentralized Registry Package Manager project for this is my DIF Hackathon 2024 submission, and we're just going to jump right in. So this is the repo, bnani, github.com/bnani/drpm.tools. You can check out the README there or all the code. There's also a GitHub Pages link, drpm.tools. That will show you the same. And high level, Decentralized Registry Package Manager. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but the naming is meant to convey what it's doing exactly, right? So DRPM is elevator pitch, NPM for the DWeb. So it really kind of replaces NPM and replaces it with a integration tool, but doesn't replace the CLI. It replaces the registry that NPM CLI interacts with and publishes to and installs from. So DRPM is a way to integrate DIDs and DWNs to your current NPM dev workflow. And so once installed, it'll allow you to publish and to install DPKs or decentralized packages that have been published to your DWN or others. So you can install other people's code from their DWNs or from your own, and then you can publish packages to your DWN. Or if you wanted to publish to somebody else's and have them collaborate with you, you could also do that. So that's really the core of it. It's NPM for the DWeb. It allows you to install and publish DPKs to your DWN using your DID and whatever DID method you chose for storage. The goals, what was the point? Why? So the goal of DRPM is to decentralize the package management that currently is centralized on the internet. We've seen examples in the past of gatekeepers keeping people out of app stores or kicking people off socials or whatever. And, wherever you fall on all of that, at the end of the day, it's better if the users have more control. And, you look back at the early days of the internet, and that was really the intent, was user control. And we've gone very far away from that. But this project is building on top of tbd's Web 5 primitives, which use DWNs and allow users to take back control over that data by way of publishing data to their DWN, running it wherever they want, and then securing it with their DID keys that are kept on the client at the edge with encryption. Pardon me. So this project is leveraging those primitives, so DIDs, DID methods, DWNs, and lets you become the package manager. You are the registry. You are the PM. You are the start and end for all of your code and anybody else's, right? So you can publish your code to your DWN, but you can also copy somebody else's code if it's open source and public and write it to your DWN. And now you have forever a version of that code immutably in your DWN. So now you've mitigated any middleman attacks or with respect to like those centralized repos going down. Pardon me, not middleman attacks, but you've mitigated or eliminated the centralized registry risk of it going down, and then you can't run your apps or your websites crash. Do a Google search, you'll find a number of examples over the years where devs deleted code because they were so burnt out and frustrated by the community, they just decided to kill the whole thing and tank the whole internet. If you're paying attention at all to Twitter around WordPress, this is happening now. So it's super relevant. It's really powerful. It's going to give devs back the control that they seek and desire, the decentralization of a registry with the users, keeping the data with the users. So there's also some nice side effects like no censorship. So the naming of things does have to conform to a spec that we've created, but ultimately there's ways to kind of work with that a little bit, and you can never get name squatted. So nobody can just go get all of the versions or all the most popular 2, 3, 4-letter acronyms on npmjs.org. And now when you decide, hey, I've got this really awesome idea and I want to name it this and make it a monorepo, Can't do that. Now you got to go back to the drawing board because somebody's name squatting hasn't published a single thing to it. And in fact, ironically, that's what happened to us. This was called DPM. Somebody name squatted at DPM. So we ended up doing DRPM just because obviously we have to get it out to people. So it does have to live on npm.js for you to be able to install it in the first place. But maybe one day we can figure out how to work around that as well. Anyway, so no namespace limitations. Data lives at the edge. There's no broken links. There's no censorship. There's no middlemen, sniping, squatting, whatever. And so now you can keep code forever and enjoy the freedom that comes with that. Excuse me. All right, let's move on to the actual demo. So. We start with, I'm just going to walk through some of these steps because it's not really the core pieces, but they are important. So you would initially, right now, it's probably easiest to just clone the repo, do the installs, and then install the CLI. You can do a local install, so run npm run CLI install local, and that'll create this local DRPM L. And that's just for DRPM local for the avoiding naming collisions. And then from there, you can interact with this CLI. So you can do a help menu and see what is available to you. You can do a versioning. And then you can do a profile create. I'm not going to run that just because I've already done that. But you can do a profile list. Oops. It'll help if I put the whole thing in there. Right, and so then you can see your profiles. And so this brings up the concept of a profile. Pretty straightforward. It's just in a config folder in your local environment. And it just contains the information that you need to interact with whatever method of did that you're using. So because this is TBD, everything across DRPM is basically DHT out of the box. The next methods to support would be web and then BTC. And so that's where this design initially has come from, the recovery phrase, the endpoints, all this stuff, password, all this stuff will live in this little profile, and everything, entry points for interacting with all the parts of DRPM kind of start there and end there, because that's all the information for recovery and for creation of the agent for using the TBD at Web5 SDKs. So yeah, you can list things. Eventually you'd be able to switch if you wanted to create multiple DIDs and publish different things under different DIDs or for privacy or whatever. And then the next would be the configuration of the protocol. So if you go look at the protocols, you can see there's a JSON schema, and it just defines the different objects, which are just definitions of records for DWN records. The schema, the format. So the two to pay attention to here are, excuse me, let me pop that, release and package. You can see I have a couple of extras, admin, icon. These are not live, but they are will eventually be supported. But the two main things are package, which is a package record, just a JSON blob, and then there's a gzip, which is a release. So that's the actual code itself. And then if you scroll down, you'll see a structure of how these objects get structured in the DWN. And so that is everything rolls up underneath a package, which is just a JSON blob with a bunch of metadata about the package. A couple of required tags like name and latest, which is the latest version. And then you've got actions like the author can CRUD or CUD, if you will. And this is where admins come in. This will come in later, but we have a vision for the future of DRPM essentially scaling to become GitHub, to where you could provision admins and then use verifiable credentials to authenticate those admins when they're doing updates to records, which would be packages or releases. So anyway, at any rate, then you scroll down to release, you see name, version, integrity for tags required, and then you see the same actions. And so essentially this is just, again, two main record objects, package release, and some tags on them, and then the data formats. So we're storing JSON blobs, which is the package metadata, and then raw tarball bytes, which is the actual release code. Okay, so you would run this to configure your DWN with this protocol. And so in the first step, you would have done create, pass an endpoint that would have registered the DID, and that DID would be on whatever method storage of choice. This is DHT, and then you run the configure command, and this will do all of that. It will configure that protocol, and you're good to go. I'm just redoing it just for the sake of demo. This has already been done. So then, you can query the protocols. And right now, again, this is just hard-coded, not hard-coded. Well, yeah, hard-coded to just import the DRPM protocol JSON blob and just write it to your DWN and then query it back. You can imagine eventually if people wanted to customize this, you could extend this interface to do that. So that's kind of the steps you'd take to get set up and going. And then from there, this is the real core piece, is the registry. So you'd run the registry, and to kind of dig into what that is, you kind of got to understand that this project is meant to integrate directly to the NPM workflow. It's not meant to force devs to adopt new tools or new development flows. I don't want to adopt a whole new paradigm for developing code when NPM and Node and TypeScript packages are NPM first, right? So we wanted to make sure it gets adopted. We wanted people to be comfortable and use it. So we came to them. And so what does that mean? Well, we need to tell NPM during an install or a publish where to go, what to do. Because if you don't tell it what to do, it's just going to do what it's coded to do, which is to talk to registry.npmjs.org. But we don't want that. We want to use our DWN as the registry. So how do we do that? How do we hijack this flow? So that's where this npmrc file kind of comes in. So if you set everything up properly, or you just manually create this file, you'll notice it's in my user, my main user folder in the root of my computer's user. And anytime any command that you invoke with npm CLI, it sucks this up. It consumes it and parses all the pieces and decides what to do with them based on the command context. So if you're doing an install and it pulls this in, and then it checks each package. So a primer on kind of how that goes is npm is going to grab this object and iterate over each name, and going to make requests to a registry to get this named code from that registry. And if you tell it, hey, if you see this as a prefix to the code to the name in the dependency object here, let me break this out so I can put them side by side. If you see at DRPM, do this. Don't go to registry.npmjs.org. Go to this localhost, right? And so if you go to this localhost after running the registry, you'll see OK is true, and there's a little health route, basically does the same thing. And so what this is doing is anytime you want to publish something to your DWN as a DPK, you would just specify at DRPM and then / my DPK, right? There's a little more to it than that, and I'll get into that in a second, but that's kind of the concept. And so if you listed something in your deps here with that prefix, it's going to force npm to use this as the registry base domain, and then it passes in this name to that URL like so. So now you've got, if I were to abstract this a bit, scope, package name, right? But essentially it's just what is in this field, right? So it could be this. The point being, it's going to redirect to this localhost, which you're running, so you control it, and it's going to pass this name in. And so that's what's happening here. Is with that set up, and you're running the registry, and then running install, and prefixing it with the right things, it'll force the call for npm to this backend, this little express registry. And all you get, registry server, excuse me. And you can see this is pretty straightforward. There's a get, and that get is defined as these paths. So scope name ID, scope name method ID, and then put, which is a publish, which is name and ID, name method ID. And in all these cases, scope is at DRPM. And then you can see some notes here. For example, if you updated your package JSON dependencies with at DRPM / mydpk1 tilde and then this ID. This would be conformant to our specification around how to engage and properly install DPKs, engage the registry, and then properly install the DPK. And you know, you can check out this logic, and we'll kind of walk through this. But yeah, so that's kind of the magic, if you will, of what's happening behind the scenes there. Okay, so then once you start the registry, you want to publish a DPK. That makes sense. Otherwise, what are you doing here? So I've already set up a couple of demo projects, right? So I've got DPK1 and DPK2. Let me clear these out so we can do the demo properly. So in DPK1's package JSON, you can see it's this convention, as I mentioned. It's at DRPM / name of package, DPK1, tilde, and then an ID. And in this case, this corresponds to the ID or the DID that I created earlier. And the reason for that is I want to publish it to my DWN, where I've configured the protocol. And so that's the kind of the way we've decided to. This is how we've figured out over many iterations how to append the right information during the hijacked install publish flow to append this to the end of the URL, to then hit these registry routes, to then force NPM to use your DWN as the registry. And so what happens here, let me do that. So what happens here is in the install route, it's basically just throwing this away because it doesn't need it. It parses this out, or I'm sorry, it doesn't throw this away, but it parses this out, right? And it now knows DPK1 is the name and the ID is this string. Well, how does it know what method, right? How does it know where to look this ID up? And so again, as I mentioned, everything is DHT under the hood by default. So if you wanted an alternative method, you could do that. But for now, writing, publishing a package like this is equivalent to this. And if you wanted, for example, to do DWeb, you could create a DWeb, and then you would publish to a name like so. And that would allow the backend to properly parse the method, just concatenated with these tildes, and you'd be publishing to a DWeb. Bob's your uncle. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got this DPK1 example with this naming convention. That's my DID. So let's go ahead and do a publish of this package to the registry. So as you can see, it has hit that local server and done a bunch of outputs, basically saying it created a record for the package. It parsed the data, so you can see that data is just a giant JSON blob that actually mimics exactly what registry.npmjs.org stores as metadata about every package. And that gets passed during the npm put process, or the npm publish rather, and that's a part of the body of the request to the local registry. So you parse out this data from the body, and then I construct the DID, and if there's no method, it's DHT. I use a universal resolver. I find a DID document. I find an endpoint. I make a request using TBD's Web5 SDK to then write that record to the DWN under that naming convention at DRPM / DPK1 tilde ID. Then what it does is, if you look at the request, the body of the request with the metadata, there's actually an attachment. And so NPM is nice enough to provide both the attached zip, packed up and zipped up code as a base64 URL or base64 encoded string, and the metadata about it, which is auto-generated per their CLI spec. And so all of this, including that base64 string, gets created as a package record. And that's the metadata about it. Then the backend, the registry locally, is parsing this string and converting it to a tarball and writing it as a record or a package / release record, and tags with things like name, version, and integrity. So that way you could reference the name of it and a version of it. And if you want to get very specific to ensure some integrity around, like a layer of security around it, you could actually filter by the integrity SHA. Okay, so I'm running out of time, but let me move through this quickly. So that's been uploaded, and if we wanted to figure out if that worked, you can create a DRL that looks a lot like this, and this should be right. So if I click that, there you go. You can see there's the record, the data, and that's hitting my DWN's HTTP API layer and giving back this JSON blob. And then if you wanted to grab the release that was created, you could do the similar thing, but instead of the path or the param of the DRL being just /package, it would be /package release, and then a tag for name and a tag for version. And what that did was, because it's a gzip MIME type, and that's how it's getting stored in the DWN, and browsers can interpret that, it knows to download that as a release or a gzip. So it downloads the release as a gzip zipped folder, and if you unzip it, you inspect this index. In fact, you'll see there it is, hello DPK. That's the exact code. Boom. So there you go. So that was a demo of publishing and then referencing, being able to just check using the DRLs. But obviously, you want to be able to install these things into your actual project. And so the way you could do that is through a named CLI install or a reference to that package in the dependencies with a version, and then running the install. So I'm going to demo that now. So if we go over the second DPK, DPK2, and we go look at that package JSON, you can see that, I've named it as such. It's, blank. It's just got, some random stuff in there. And if I do npm install at DRPM DPK1, and I pull this up, this is by far the slower of the processes, but so there you go. You can see some output there. Installing this DPK, resolving the DID document using the universal resolver, getting the endpoint from where it should install from, and then fetching using a DRL constructed as so, endpoint /did /read protocols /base64 URL encoding of the protocol URI in the protocol structure. So that's here, this thing, and then /package, right? And then a filter for the name. And that's getting back that JSON blob I showed you a second ago. And then the second one is doing a similar thing, all the same stuff, all the way up until package, adds the release, adds the query filters for name and version. And then this is actually going to bring back the tarball, which is what I showed you a second ago. And so it's interesting, NPM's flow actually doesn't require you to return anything other than the tarball link, or rather the URL to the tarball. Which is super convenient. So that's what it's actually doing on the back end when you install. It's grabbing the metadata and then grabbing the tarball URL for the current version based on what you put into like the latest, right? The latest in this case is 100. And then it returns back that URL to the CLI, which just does a GET request to grab that. Well, because the DWN HTTP API has this ability to allow me to construct a DRL that will point to the data of a specific record in this way, all I have to do is return this URL, an actual DRL, directly back to the NPM CLI, and it handles the rest. So now we can see, if we look at the node modules, we can see the file path at DRPM /dpk1 tilde ID index.ts, and there you go. Hello from DPK1 installed into DPK2. And then you can go look at this dependencies object and see the same. The other way to do this, obviously, is you could just list it explicitly, and then you just run npm install. If alternative ways of interacting with the registry without updating your npm-rc file, there is a handy little flag where you can do registry. And so this would allow you to not add those lines to your npm-rc, but still allow you to tell npm to go to the local registry instead of its default registry. And this will be something that we play with later around how to make these naming conventions a little less nasty. For example, you can imagine an npm publish on DPK2, and instead of prefixing it as so, you could just do this, which would be a little cleaner. And then in the publish, you would specify the localhost. There are some considerations around this, and this would require some changes to the DRPM structure a little bit. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of possibilities here. And there's a lot of ways to toggle through all these possibilities for devs. So just wanted to highlight that. But yeah, that's my project. That's our demo. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're interested and want to contact me or any of the team, we're in. A lot of us are in Discord, or you can find us on GitHub at binani/drpm.tools. I'm in the TBD Discord pretty much every day, and reach out, collaborate. Let's build stuff. And thanks for your time.